It's been said that public speaking is one of the most feared and stressful activities an individual can undertake. But why is that? What is it about standing in front of a group of people for a few minutes and presenting information on a topic you know? Why do our hands sweat, our hearts race, and our minds sometimes go blank?
Anytime we're getting social feedback, anytime we're being evaluated by other people in our groups, these things are really important to people because our survival depends on it. And so if you can potentially lose social standing, then your survival is actually impacted negatively. And that's why we care so much about social evaluation.
That's Jeremy Jameson, assistant professor of social psychology at the University of Rochester in New York. He and his colleagues studied the stress of public speaking, including the signs that a speaker is feeling the pressure. These reactions, though, need to be interpreted carefully.
Pretty much the signs that we notice, things like our heart might be racing, our palms might be sweaty, these things just mean that we're feeling a lot of arousal. So the sympathetic nervous system is one of our body's stress response systems. And when it comes online because we're feeling a lot of this arousal. And that's all it's saying. Those signs, they don't have any valence component to them. Having sweaty palms or racing heart, it's not necessarily bad or good. The valence in what we call approach and avoidance motivation components, where those come from, is how we appraise both the situation and our body's responses. So our cognitive perceptions of what's going on.
To find out what was going on, Jameson wired up two groups of test subjects to monitor their hearts and blood flow. Then he gave each group 3 minutes to prepare a 5-minute speech on their strong and weak points. The subjects gave their talks in front of evaluators who gave out nonverbal, negative feedback, frowning, furrowing their brows, writing things down to heighten the anxiety levels of the subjects. The only difference between the two groups of subjects is that one group was instructed that stress can be a good thing.
The common theme behind these instructions was that the stress you're experiencing, especially the arousal you're experiencing with stress, it's not bad. So people automatically assume that any time they're feeling kind of their heart racing or their palms sweating, that this is a negative sign that they're going to do bad on whatever task is coming up after that. But that's not necessarily the case, that people can perceive arousal as a coping tool. This is actually helping you do well. So we go into talking about how if we didn't have these responses, our ancestors wouldn't have survived. So this is a very adaptive thing that we have. There's a reason why our bodies have stress responses. We talk about how an increase in arousal can help deliver oxygenated blood around the body, especially to the brain. Talk about how this kind of positive sorts of stress responses, these approach sort of stress responses, are associated with improvements in cognitive performance. So people are getting this information before, half the people are getting the information before they begin their speech about the benefits of stress arousal.
And the outcome? Jameson says the group that was shown that stress can be beneficial did better than the group that received no instruction before speaking.
We found out that the people who were given the reappraisal instructions, or who were told to reframe the meaning of stress, they had much more adaptive sorts of stress responses than those who didn't get the instructions. And what we mean by adaptive responses was that we weren't decreasing the amount of overall arousal. So these people were still highly aroused, so they had a lot of sympathetic nervous system activation. But the key was that the type of stress was changing. And these individuals are pumping more blood through the body per minute. And more blood means more oxygen is getting out to these peripheral areas. And that is a good thing, usually for any kind of performance, including speaking performance or test performance.
Think of world-class athletes preparing to perform. They feel anxious and can exhibit sweaty palms and increased heart rates because their jobs are stressful. Jameson says that the difference is that in their minds, they reframe that stress to be a good thing that they can use to their advantage, and they end up performing better. He also says that this ability to reframe the meaning of stress can have a residual effect.
We had them do an attentional bias task. And what this task was getting at was whether people were being vigilant for threat cues in the future, so coming up. And what we found was that the reappraisal participants were less vigilant for threat cues after the speech than people who were not given the instructions. And the reason why that finding, I think, is important is because it can help inform how these individuals would respond to future instances of stress. So if you're very vigilant for threatening information, some ambiguous feedback you might get from somebody will be construed as negative feedback, and then that might elicit a sort of negative stress response. On the other hand, if you're not vigilant for these threat cues, an ambiguous situation might just be seen as neutral or even maybe slightly positive, and you won't have the same kind of response. And so I thought that was really interesting.
As we said, the fear of a poor evaluation can lead to the stress that people have when they speak in public. But why do people think they'll be evaluated poorly? Philip Dalton is an associate professor of rhetoric and chair of that department at Hofstra University in New York. He says that among his students, not being prepared is a big anxiety producer.
A lot of people have anxiety in the build-up to the event, and as a consequence of that, they don't prepare sometimes. And then when the event time comes, there's kind of a panic, a realization that I may not be prepared. And some of that may be real, and some of that may be built up in their mind, this feeling that they're not prepared, which is kind of normal if you think about it. If this is an activity that you've not done a whole lot of in your life, you don't have a real sense of what it means to be adequately prepared. So you can overthink that and let it get ahead of you.
Dalton says that part of being poorly prepared is not being able to impart information to your audience in a cogent and logical manner.
Another problem I see with a lot of students in public speaking situations is not knowing well how to organize their thoughts and ideas. I think a lot of students aren't familiar with the inventionary process, where you come to know better through the process of engaging your ideas, which ideas are good, which ones are defensible, which ones have good support for them. That is a product of writing them down or talking with others about them. And being vaguely familiar with what you want to say is not the same as planning what you want to say. And it's in the planning that you get to know well what you can get away with. And it's also in the planning that you build up a comfort with the subject matter.
Jeremy Jameson says that real practice is a great way to reduce negative stress behind the lectern.
What practice does is it increases our appraisal of our ability to cope with something. So if we practice a lot, we've done a lot of hard work that went into this, we're confident that we have the ability to address this stressful situation because this speech is very well learned. We've put a lot of hard work into preparing it, into making it. And so we appraise our coping resources as high, and we do better. Also working off of drive theory, you see that people, when they can almost automatize things, so the speech is so well learned that you just kind of give it from memory, you could just kind of give it automatically. You can blank out and just go. Those situations can be good too. When you're in these kind of public speaking situations and there is this high level of arousal, that arousal can help facilitate that dominant response, which is the well-learned speech in that case. So there is reason to think that practice is a very, very good thing for preparing public speeches.
Philip Dalton says that relaxing before giving a speech can help, and so can knowing how to breathe correctly during your address.
Another thing I tell students is to control their breathing. It sounds a little strange, but I very often watch students speak and they lose control of their breath. And there's a difference between speaking from your diaphragm and speaking from your chest. And when you speak from your chest, you lose control of the force of your voice. But the student getting up there speaking doesn't know that that's what's happening. They just feel nervous. And if they learn to speak from their diaphragm and to project from their diaphragm, they end up with more air. But they also breathe longer or more often, which gives them some pauses and a little moment to kind of relax.
Finally, Dalton says that speakers should be aware that they themselves often overestimate the amount of nervousness the audience picks up on. Most of the time, listeners don't know that you have sweaty palms, flushing in the face, or shaking knees, so it doesn't pay to worry that they do. He also suggests that if you're asked to deliver an address, study the elements of a good speech before you begin writing.
They include an introduction, body, and a conclusion. You should have a thought or a point or a thesis, and you should convey reasons to believe your thesis if it's a persuasive speech, or support if it's just informative. And you should use things like transitions and signposting. So as you go from one point to another, you segue and you indicate where you're going. So there's kind of a meta-awareness of the content of your speech. And when you know those things, the idea of getting up and speaking in front of a group becomes less daunting. You're filling in the blanks, but you know what blanks to fill. That's the comforting thing.
You can find out more about Philip Dalton and the Department of Rhetoric at hofstra.edu and on Facebook. To read up on Jeremy Jameson and his research, log on to rochester.edu. For more information about all of our guests, you can always visit our site at viewpointsonline.net. Our show is written and produced by Pat Reuter. Our production directors are Sean Waldron, Reed Pence, and Nick Hofstra. I'm Marty Peterson.
Did you know by age 50, half of all men have an enlarged prostate? This means more urges to urinate, longer bathroom trips, waking at night to urinate, or issues with sex. If this sounds familiar, call us now, because we're shipping free bottles of Super Beta Prostate to listeners of this station. Super Beta Prostate is a non-prescription formula guaranteed to reduce the symptoms of your enlarged prostate. It's yours free. Pay only shipping and handling. Just call 1-800-859-0158. In clinical trials, the ingredient in Super Beta Prostate was shown to reduce urges to urinate, improve bladder emptying, reduce waking at night to urinate, and improve quality of life. This Super Beta Prostate free offer is for listeners of this station, but it won't last. Don't wait. Just call 1-800-859-0158. That's 1-800-859-0158. Call 1-800-859-0158.